In this session, we're going to look at the topic adaptation. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to define adaptation and to also give the different types of adaptation in terms of its coloration, structural adaptation, and behavioral adaptation. Join me as we roll. So, what is the meaning of adaptation? Adaptation is basically talking about how living organisms survive by making use of its structural parts, behavioral aspects, and coloration in order to survive in an environment. When I say survive, I'm talking about escaping, evading predators, trying to get away from trouble, danger. That is basically what I mean by adaptation. And how to also make use of these parts to be able to survive, to take in food materials and to conserve food materials. So, adaptive coloration for protection, that is the first thing we're going to look at. We're looking at counter shading. What is counter shading? Counter shading is basically talking about two different colors that are used by animals. There are so many animals that make use of two different colors. One, it could be a dog. If you look at the dorsal part of a dog, which is the upper part of a dog, it's usually dark in coloration. And if you look at the lower ventral part, it's usually light in coloration. That is how nature made it, so that it blends with its natural environment. The same thing with tilapia fish, which is the diagram you can see on the screen. The upper part, which is the dorsal part, is dark in coloration. And the lower part, which is the ventral part, is silver white in coloration. Now I'm going to explain how it makes use of its two different colors in order to survive. Now, for the tilapia fish, if it's in a water body and there's presence of predator, if the predator is above the tilapia fish, when the predator looks down, the dark dorsal coloration blends with the background of the water body, because the lower part of the water body is usually dark in coloration. So it becomes difficult for the predator to be able to spot the prey. Now look at it from below. If the predator is below the tilapia fish and looks up, because of the white silver coloration which blends with the sky, it becomes difficult for the predator to detect that there's presence of tilapia fish. So that's how counter shading works in tilapia fish. We're going to look at another aspect under this. We're going to look at warning coloration. Now, you must have observed that so many species of living organisms, animals, they have bright colors. The bright colors is not to serve as beauty, although it does look beautiful. It does look beautiful. But it's to serve as a warning that don't come close, I am dangerous. That is basically what these colors serve as. One of them we're going to look at is the mushroom. Mushroom is a fungi. The mushroom, especially fly agaric mushroom and Amanita phalloides. In the fly agaric mushroom, it has a red cap. This is the red cap here. This is the red cap. So it has a red cap. And this red cap enables this mushroom to give you a kind of warning that yes, I am dangerous. If you tap under the cap, if you touch under the cap, if you go under and you touch the cap, you begin to see white specks of coloration on your hand. When you see white specks of coloration on your hand, please don't dare make it a recipe. Don't dare make it as a diet. Don't dare eat it, because it can kill. Way back during the war periods, there were stories that they used this particular species of mushroom to kill soldiers by poisoning their food. So please stay off it. Stay off. If you're looking for a palatable mushroom, once you see these signs, please don't go close to it. Another one that falls in the same family, but it's a bit different from the fly agaric mushroom, is the Amanita phalloides. The Amanita phalloides is white in coloration, completely white in coloration. The same thing applies. When you touch under the cap, there will be stains of white on your hand. And when there's stains of white on your hand, that means it's very, very dangerous. So you have to keep off. I want to go back to talk about fly agaric. The reason why it's called fly agaric. The reason why it's called fly agaric mushroom is that if you place it in a jar, it attracts flies. The smell attracts flies. That's why it's called fly agaric mushroom. Now let's go to another aspect under adaptation. We're looking at behavioral adaptation in social animals, social insects. And one of such social insects we're going to look at is the termite. We're going to look at different castes of termite. When you ask what is caste? A caste is like a ranking. It's like ranking in the termite colony. Just like we have in the army. We have different ranks. The general, we have the colonel, we have and so on. That is how it is when it comes to the termite kingdom, in the termite colony. Yes, we're looking at the caste of termites because it's a social insect. Why is it termed a social insect? It's because they live in an organized community and they interact with each other. So we're looking at the caste, queen. This is a queen. The queen has a small head, a small thorax, and a very big, enlarged abdomen. Now, a high-performance queen like this lays lots of eggs. I know you'll be wondering, is it 100 eggs? 200 eggs? A high-performance queen lays about 30,000 eggs per day. 30,000 eggs per day. And this 30,000 eggs per day, if you multiply it by 365 days, you're going to have 10,950,000 eggs per year. The lifespan of a termite is 15 years. If you now multiply it by 15 years, you're going to have 164,250,000 eggs for its entire lifespan. Now, that's a whole lot. That is what the queen does. The queen is helpless. It can't move an inch. The only sole function of a queen is to lay eggs. That's just its role. And then we have the king. The king is smaller compared to the queen. And the basic function of a king is to fertilize the queen. That's the basic function of the king, to fertilize the queen, to lay eggs. Now you'll be wondering, how did this come about? It basically started like this. The queen and the king were once reproductive insects. They were once in the case of the reproductives. So there's what we call nuptial flight. When nuptial flight occurs, the king and the queen, they pair together. They dig a hole and begin their own colony. That is how it works. They all look for pairs and begin their own colony. Dig a hole and begin to establish their own colony. So that's basically how it works. The winged reproductives are those that have wings and they can fly. They go out to establish their own colony. That's the role of a winged reproductive. This is the structure that you see here. Then we have the soldiers. Take note. The queen, the king, and the winged reproductive, they are all productive. They are all reproductive. Then we have the soldiers. The soldiers are sterile. When I mean they are sterile, they cannot produce. They cannot produce eggs. They cannot function to produce eggs. And we have two types of soldiers. We have the nasute soldier and we have the mandibulate soldiers. The nasute soldier. The nasute soldier has a piercing mouthpart, a long piercing mouthpart, which it uses to introduce poison into an intruder. Or it uses to attack. That is what it uses. It uses its pointed mouthpart, which it uses to inject poison. Then we have the mandibulate soldier. The mandibulate soldier has a well-defined mandible and maxillae, which it uses to bite. And it can be very, very painful. That is the mandibulate soldier. Take note, both of them are sterile and they are both blind. They make use of their senses mostly, their sense of smell mostly. Then we have the workers. The workers, their role is cumbersome. They are known as the housemaids of the termite kingdom. What are their roles? Their role is to ensure that they carry the eggs that the female queen lays to the nursery where they groom these eggs till they become nymphs and eventually become adults, because the termites carries out metamorphosis, incomplete metamorphosis. That means it starts from egg to the nymph and then to the adult stage. So there is no in between. There's no in between. It's not a regular metamorphosis that starts from eggs, larva, pupa, and then imago. So that's about the termite. Now back to the role of the worker. The worker helps in feeding the whole members of the colony. It feeds the members of the colony, all the members of the colony. It also mends the anthill whenever it is damaged. You know, termites, they live in the anthill, they live in woods, and they live in in an anthill. That's where they live. So basically, that's the role of the workers. It helps to mend any abandoned part of their residence where they stay. The worker also helps in cultivating fungi so that they can soften wood that has been taken, and then they eventually eat up the wood and the fungi when it has been softened. That is the role of the worker. The worker also plays roles by clearing up the termite kingdom, especially when members die. They eat up these members. So when they eat up these members, they help. They help a lot in cleaning the environment of the termite kingdom. They also cause aeration in the soil because their digging process enables the soil to be exposed to the presence of air. So it causes aeration in the soil, which is good for plants that are growing in such abode. So that's basically the function of the workers. Then we're going to look at the function of case over again. We're looking at the king. I told you the king is a reproductive, and it helps in making sure that the queen produces. The queen is role and function is to lay eggs. Then we have the wing reproductives, which pair together under the process known as nuptial flight, get like a wedding kind of flight, and then they come together and establish their own colony. The soldiers help in protecting the kingdom of the termites, and then the workers serve various roles in taking care of members of the case of the termites. Now, economic importance of termites. There are very many economic importance of termites. Number one, the clay from anthill is used to build the surface of tennis courts. I'm sure most of you never knew that. Now you know. Number two, they destroy books and wood furniture due to their feeding habits. And that shouldn't be new to you. It has happened in my house. I don't know whether it has happened in your house. Number three, they help in aerating the soil, which they are found in. I told you something about that. The next one, they produce a good source of protein and fats. People do actually eat termites because of its proteinous, the rich proteinous nature of these insects, and fats as well. Then the last, the activities due to breakdown of woods adds humus to the soil. That means their activities helps in the breakdown of wood with the addition of humus to the soil, which is a good thing for the soil. So that's basically talking about the economic importance of termites. We now look at another aspect under adaptation, which is basking in the sun. Basking in the sun is usually carried out by reptiles. To be precise, it can be carried out by red agama lizard or lizards generally. What do I mean by basking in the sun? What I mean by basking in the sun is a situation whereby a reptile baths in the sun because it's a cold-blooded animal. It needs the presence of the sun to increase its metabolism, because without the increase of its metabolism, food substances that are taken down into his body will be difficult to be broken down by his body cells. So it needs this because it lacks that warmth as warm-blooded animals to break down these things. So it needs to be exposed to the sun to carry out this process and to also increase its activity, to make it to be agile. That is why it basks in the sun. And once it basks in the sun, it helps it to energize it, the creature, and to add coloration to the creature. Now we look at another one, hibernation. Hibernation, and I'm going to center on bears and bats. What is hibernation? Hibernation is a situation whereby animals that are found in a winter environment, in a cold environment, they tend to sleep more often. They tend to sleep more often than usual because of the cold environment. It's like a resting stage. And because of this, their body system is inactive at that point in time. It's a way of survival. It's a way in which they can keep their bodies in check. So in the case of the bear that you see here on this diagram, the bear is sleeping because of the cold atmosphere. Sleeping, tucked in and sleeping in this cold atmosphere. Then we have the bats. One unique thing that occurs with the bat is that the bat tends to sleep, to go out during the day to hunt for food, which is abnormal. A bat doesn't do that during the day, but it does that during the day because of how cold the environment is. He wakes up from his sleep, as you can see here, wakes up from his sleep, and then he flies out during the day to look for food. So those are various things that occur during hibernation in these creatures. Hibernation takes place in other parts of, in a system of other animals as well. It's not only them, but I'm just using them as a critical example to explain. Now I'm going to look at estivation. Estivation occurs in lungfish and crocodile and a whole lot of animals as well. This happens during a hot, dry day. When the atmosphere is very, very hot, the weather is very, very hot, what happens? The lungfish, which is this diagram here, which is the first diagram here, tends to hide itself or bury itself in the mud. And the crocodile also buries itself in the mud until the raining period starts before they now come out. Before they now come out from burying themselves in the mud. So that's estivation. And at that point in time, their body system is inactive. They have low metabolic process occurring in their systems. So that is how it works, estivation. Yes, so we're going to look at another aspect. We're looking at the structural adaptation of birds in terms of their beaks and feet. The first one is the duck. The duck has a filtering mouthpart, or they call it serrated mouthpart, which is used to filter food when it's taking food into its system. It has a leg that has webs for swimming. Then we have the kingfisher and heron fish. It has a pointed, sharp beak, which is used to kill fishes in a water body. And it has a long leg for wading in water or walking in water, so as to make the movement easy. We also have birds that specialize in catching insects. Yes. Then we have the parrot. The parrot cracks seeds. The function of the parrot is that it cracks seeds, and it has a leg that it uses to perch on trees. Then we have the hawk, vulture. No, sorry. We have the hawk. We have the hawk, and we have the eagle, which has a sharp pointed mouthpart, which it uses to tear the flesh of its prey. And it also has a sharp claws for tearing and holding onto its prey. We have the woodpecker. The woodpecker has a sharp mouthpart, sharp pointed mouthpart, which is used to drill holes in the back of trees. And when it drills holes in the back of trees, it uses its mouthparts to get insects that are found in the back of trees. It has also legs for climbing and holding onto various parts of the trees. Then we have the domestic fowl. The domestic fowl has a honey beak, a short honey beak, which it uses to peck on grains and other food substances. And it has a very hard leg system. The hard leg enables it to scratch the ground in search of food or to dig the ground. Then we have the weaver birds. The weaver birds is this structure here, you see here. And this weaver birds has mouth parts that are short for getting seeds. They use those mouth parts to get seeds. Then we have this structure here, which is a sunbird. The sunbird has a long, hollow mouth part with tubular tongue, which it uses to suck nectar from flowers. So that is it about the adaptation of birds in terms of its beaks and feed for feeding. Now the next one we're going to look at is the mouth parts of butterfly and moth and mosquito. In terms of the mouth parts for butterfly and moth, they have similar mouth parts which they use for feeding. Now this is what happens. The butterfly has a long mouth part which is known as proboscis, which is this structure that you see here. This is a proboscis. And it's usually uncoiled, especially when it's not feeding. But when it's feeding, it unrolls this mouth part to feed on the nectar of flowers. So that's the role of the proboscis. The proboscis is modified because it has the presence of maxillae and mandibles, which are modified to form this structure that you see here, known as proboscis. Then it has the labial palpus. The labial palp is for tasting. That's the function of the labial palp. Then we now look at that of the mosquito. The mosquito has mandibles. It also has labrum. It has labium. The labrum is the upper part of the mosquito. It's like a lip, the upper lip of the mosquito. Then the labium is the lower lip of the mosquito. It also has hypopharynx. The hypopharynx helps in secreting like saliva. That's the function of hypopharynx. The maxilla is the upper part. It's like an upper jaw. Then the mandible is the lower jaw. How does it use its mouth parts to feed? The mosquito has a piercing mouth part. So when it pierces the skin of its victim, it begins to suck. So it's not like that of butterfly that sucks. The butterfly doesn't have a piercing mouth part, but it just has a sucking mouth part. Whereas the mosquito has a piercing mouth part and a sucking mouth part. So that's how it functions. Now we're looking at another aspect of adaptation. We're looking at protection and defense. We're concentrating on stick insects, praying mantis, and toad. In the case of the stick insects defends itself because it resembles a twig of a tree. And one fascinating thing about this stick insect is that it stays still. It doesn't move about. You hardly see it move about. So it makes it very, very impossible for you to detect that that is actually a stick insect. In fact, if I should ask you how many stick insects do you see here, you will tell me one. Whereas there are two. The one on top is the male, and the one below is the female. This structure you see here is the female. So that's how the stick insect does its own form of protection. That's how it carries out its own form of protection from evading from predators, not allowing them to detect them. Now we also have the praying mantis. Back in my school days, we used to call it the boxer. The praying mantis has spikes. It has spikes all over its forelimb. And these sharp spikes helps it to defend itself. It helps it to kill prey, and it helps it to protect itself against an intruder or against a predator when it's not feeling secured. That's how it defends itself, the praying mantis. Now we also have another one. We have the toad. The toad, how does it protect itself? If the toad realizes that it is in danger, what it does is that it begins to swells up into a very big ball, so that it will be very impossible for its predator to swallow it. That's how the toad protects itself. We're looking at another aspect. We're looking at securing of mates in the agama lizard and in the peacock. Now, the agama lizard usually has bright colors. The male has bright colors. It has a red head and a blue part of the remaining body parts is colored blue. Now, what does it do? If a male like this has bright colors, it attracts the females. That is what the females love. That's what they like. Especially when it has beautiful colors, it attracts them to the males. Another angle in which they carry out their mating ritual is that sometimes it is instigated by the female. What does the female do? It exposes its anal parts to the male. And when it exposes its anal parts to the male, that now motivates the male. And the male begins to chase the female around. I don't know whether some of you have come across that. I've come across that ritual of mating before. Now we're looking at the next one, which is the peacock. The peacock has beautiful feathers, especially the male. It has beautiful colors on his body parts and feathers. These beautiful colors on the feathers attracts the females. That is what the females love. So with that, the male can have his sexual rampage with any female because of the colors. So that's that for securing of mates. Now, regulating body temperature. Mammals have a unique way of regulating their body temperature using their skin. You see the structure here? This is skin anatomy of a mammal. How does it work? How it works is this. During a hot day, the arteries, the walls of the arteries, the muscular walls of the arteries, during a hot day, they relax. And once they relax, this now gives rise for blood flow. The blood flow begins to increase. And when the blood flow begins to increase, the pores on the skin opens up. It makes the hair follicle to relax, and the hair relaxes. It assumes a slant position. So from there, sweat comes out. And when the sweat comes out, it acts as a way to cool the body during a hot day. Whereas on a cold day, it helps to cool the body on a hot day. That process is known as vasodilation. Whereas on a cold day, the muscular walls of the arteries contract. And once the muscular walls of the arteries contract, that reduces the blood flow. And because of that, that will now make the hair follicle to stand erect. And once the hair follicle stands erect, it tends to block the pores on the skin. And when it tends to block the pores on the skin, it becomes difficult for heat to be released from the body of the animal. And once the heat is not released from the body of the animal, it's a process of warming the body during a cold weather or cold atmosphere. That process is known as vasoconstriction. That's why most times when you see people, you see their hair stands in the cold. Now we're going to look at the feather of birds. How do they operate? How do they make use of this their feather during a cold day? In terms of birds, they trap enough air between their body and the feather. Once they trap enough air between the body and the feather, they use their body to heat up the air that has been trapped. Once they heat up the air that has been trapped, is a way of warming themselves during a cold day. And when you talk about their feet, how do they warm their feet? Most times you see birds standing on one foot. The reason for that is because they take one foot into where the feathers are for warming. Once it has warmed that particular foot enough, it takes up the other one for warming as well. So that is how the bird operates in terms of warming itself during a cold day. Now we're looking at conservation of water. Conserve water in spines and scales. When you talk about spines, what comes to your mind is cactus. Cactus is a plant and is usually found in a desert area. The cactus are known as xerophytes because they are found in areas that lack water. So their leaves are modified to form spines. These spines enable it to conserve water. It doesn't allow the loss of water from the body of the plants. We now look at that of the scales. This creature that you see here is known as a pangolin. The pangolin has scales all over its body. And the essence of these scales is to enable it to avoid the loss of water. It becomes very, very difficult for it to lose water from its body parts because of the presence of the scales. The pangolin is an anteater. If you never knew that information, you've heard it now. Now, I want to summarize all what we've been doing. I talked about adaptation and I talked about the different types of adaptation. I talked about the behavioral adaptation. I talked about adaptation due to color, and I also talked about adaptation due to color, and I also talked about adaptation due to behavior. What is adaptation now? Adaptation is a way living organisms survive by making use of all these things that I've mentioned. That is adaptation. Talked about coloration. I talked about warning coloration by mushroom. I talked about counter shading, how animals make use of two different distinct colors in order to escape its predators. And I talked about structural adaptations such as that of the pangolin, which makes use of its scales, and the spines of a cactus, which they make use of to conserve water. Yes. So with this, I have come to the conclusion of this session in biology. Join me as we go into the question and answer